On the day of my 10th wedding anniversary with Willow, I specially reserved the entire French restaurant in the city center. All because Willow once said that her favorite dish there was the signature steak. As the youngest female professor at Capital University, she was always worried about maintaining her image in front of her students, so she never allowed me to pick her up in public. But that day, for the first time ever, she took the initiative to ask me to pick her up from work at the university. Just thinking about the smile she would show when she saw everything I had carefully prepared for her filled my heart with lightness. However, halfway through the drive, a garbage truck that suddenly appeared rammed into my car, sending both me and the vehicle crashing into the moat. Thanks to timely rescue, I managed to survive, but inevitably fell into a coma. Daddy. Daddy. In the haze, I could vaguely hear the soft voices of my son and daughter calling me. The twins were the precious children my beloved Willow had carried for 10 months to bring into this world. And aside from her, they were the ones I cared about most in my life. It was only under their tender, childlike calls that my consciousness slowly began to return. When I woke up, the children were nowhere to be seen. Only my wife, Willow, sat by the hospital bed, looking at me expressionlessly. When she saw that I was awake, there was not a trace of joy on her face. She had always been a cold person, and I didn't mind. Unable to speak with the oxygen mask on, I could only barely raise my hand, trying to touch hers to reassure her not to worry. But when she noticed my movement, she frowned in disgust, withdrew her hand, and placed it on the oxygen machine beside me. Chapter 1. Then I heard Willow say, "George, you know what? I've been waiting for this day. After you caused Makoto's death, you should have expected to end up like this. If you hadn't taken me away from him, Makoto wouldn't have drowned himself in alcohol every day from the pain, and he wouldn't have died so young." Her obsidian-like eyes stared at me calmly as she enunciated each word. "George, you killed him. You destroyed the beautiful life that should have belonged to him and me." Her words were like poisoned arrows, shattering, piece by piece, the belief I had held onto all these years, that she loved me. Makoto. I hadn't heard that name in over a decade. I only knew that he had died, and at the time, Willow had been saddened for quite a while out of old friendship, but I never knew that after all these years, she still hadn't forgotten him, and had even blamed his death on me. Tears welled in the corners of Willow's eyes, as if she were deeply sorrowful. Yet the next moment, she curled her lips into a smile, gentle and beautiful, yet carrying a hint of brokenness and something almost twisted. She said, "The car accident didn't kill you. That's fine. I can send you off myself." Before I could even process what she meant, her well-maintained, delicate hand slowly began to pull out the oxygen tube that was keeping me alive. Without oxygen, unable to breathe on my own, my vision began to darken in waves, as if a massive vortex was gradually swallowing me whole. Seeing my helpless convulsions, Willow's smile grew even brighter. I couldn't tell if it was just my imagination, but I clearly saw a trace of satisfaction in her eyes. At that moment, I finally understood. The more than 10 years she had spent with me had all been nothing more than revenge for Makoto's death. I refused to accept it. I couldn't believe that in all these years, through my love, my care, and my devotion, she hadn't developed even the slightest feeling for me. At the very least, we had 2 lovely children. Thinking of them, a flicker of will to survive ignited in my mind. I forced myself to stay conscious, struggling to lift my hand to press the call button by the bed. But in the next second, Willow said, "Oh right, I forgot to tell you, the 2 children aren't yours either. I had them with some random man. After all, just the thought of bearing children for someone as despicable and shameless as you makes me feel sick, like I want to throw up." Her words crushed me completely, and severed my final desire to live. My eyelids fell shut, and her familiar yet utterly unfamiliar figure slowly faded from my sight. Chapter 2. The sound of desks and chairs colliding made my eardrums tremble. I jolted awake, lifting my head, only to meet a pair of young, handsome eyes. The boy in front of me gave me a provocative smile, waved the blue envelope in his hand, and boldly stuffed it into the desk of the seat in front of me. He said, "Buddy, if you know what's good for you, don't try anything. I know you and Willow grew up together as neighbors. You want her to be happy in the future too, right?" Hearing his words, I froze for a moment. Only then did I realize I had been reborn. Reborn at the exact moment Makoto slipped Willow the love letter. It all came back to me. In my previous life, after Makoto left, I took the letter and treated it as evidence. Then I turned around and reported his pursuit of her to the teacher and Willow's parents. Under pressure from both the school and her family, Makoto had no choice but to keep his distance from Willow, to prevent a top student, ranked second in the entire school, from being led astray. The homeroom teacher even disciplined Makoto on the grounds of violating school rules. Freed from the school's constraints, Makoto began hanging out with delinquent friends outside school, drinking and wasting his days, until he eventually died in a drunk driving accident from street racing. So, for someone like that, Willow had hated me for more than 10 years. In my previous life, After I got what I wished for and married her, I worked myself to the bone just to give her and our children a life free from worry. I believed I was a good husband, a good father. I did everything a man could possibly do for the woman he loved and for his family. And yet, in the end, I was killed by the very person I had loved for so many years, my wife, the one who slept beside me. A surge of overwhelming sorrow and unwillingness welled up in my chest, and at this moment, the impatience and warning in Makoto's eyes only made everything feel even more ironic. There was no denying it, Makoto was good-looking. With his rebellious yet striking appearance, there wasn't a single girl who wouldn't be drawn to him. I stared into his eyes in silence for a long time. Finally, I slowly nodded. Yes, I said, I want her to be happy. Since in my previous life Willow had never forgotten Makoto, I decided to respect her choice and give her the life she truly wanted. Makoto seemed very satisfied with my answer and turned to leave the classroom. Just as I had promised, I didn't touch the love letter he gave Willow, nor did I intend to secretly report it to her parents or teachers like before. After PE class, when I saw Willow return, her face flushed red from the sun, radiating youthful energy, my heart still couldn't help but tremble. Not from love, but from that deep, unhealable pain of being betrayed by the person I loved the most. George, today the teacher had us play volleyball with Class 8. Too bad you asked for leave because of your headache, you totally missed out. Back then, Willow had a carefree personality. When she spoke to me, her tone still carried the intimacy and teasing unique to childhood friends. I opened my mouth, instinctively wanting to chat with her like I used to, but in the end, not a single word came out. She didn't seem to care about my reaction. Sitting in her front row seat, she casually tidied up and prepared the books for the next class. Her hand had just reached into the desk when she pulled out the blue envelope. Her deskmate spotted it immediately and let out a loud cry. A love letter. That single phrase was like a stone dropped into water, sending ripples through the otherwise dull and monotonous lives of the second-year high school students. Many of them turned to look over at once. Under everyone's gaze, a faint blush instantly spread across Willow's fair neck. Someone called out, "Not bad, George. So you skipped PE just to slip Willow a love letter. You two grew up together, why even bother with a love letter? If I were you, I'd just go straight to her house and propose already." Chapter 3. A few classmates I was close with laughed and teased me. I calmly shook my head before I could even deny it. Willow anxiously interrupted them. "Don't talk nonsense. George and I are just ordinary neighbors." Willow and I were inseparable, going to and from school together every day. The class had spread countless rumors about us. Hearing her deny it so bluntly for the first time, the classmates exchanged puzzled looks. Willow continued, "Don't make wild guesses, you might delay our class genius George from getting a girlfriend." She added that last sentence to cover up the awkwardness. From beginning to end, she never once turned around to look at me. Something felt off, but before I could think further, a sharp-eyed classmate noticed something on the love letter. He said, "The signature says Ito. There's only one person in our class with that surname. Damn, it's Makoto Ito." A boy like Makoto, handsome and rebellious, had plenty of girls secretly crushing on him. The moment they realized he liked Willow, and had even confessed to her in such a romantic way, countless girls in the class felt their hearts shatter. Someone joked, "Willow's a top student. How could she possibly?" Makoto was a delinquent, and no one dared to offend him, so the speaker stopped halfway. But everyone understood the implication. There was no way Willow would fall for someone like Makoto, a troublemaker with a bad record. Yet the very next second, who said I wouldn't agree? Willow suddenly stood up, raising the love letter she had already opened. I saw that it contained only one line, written in bold black letters. "Will you be my girlfriend?" The preparatory bell rang, and right on cue, Makoto appeared at the classroom door. Willow walked straight toward him. In front of the entire class, her voice trembling, she loudly said, "Makoto, I accept." Makoto clearly hadn't expected Willow to be this bold. He froze for a moment before pulling her into his arms. Although he let go after just a brief hug, the act was enough to instantly ignite the atmosphere in the classroom. Many students cheered, whistling and making playful noises. Only I stood there, watching everything coldly, until the pen cap in my palm pierced my skin, sending a sharp sting of pain through me. Willow and I were neighbors, but we were closer than ordinary neighbors. My father and Willow's father were colleagues at a well-known state-owned enterprise in the city. They had joined the company together when they were young. They were similar in age and equally capable. At first, they saw each other as rivals and goals to strive toward. But as they advanced side by side, they gradually became close friends who could talk about anything. Later, they each started their own families. The company assigned them housing in the residential compound, and by coincidence, they lived in the same building, one floor above the other. The following year, they each had a child, me and Willow. Even though I was 1 month older than Willow, I had always been shorter than her when we were young. Whenever the other kids in the compound bullied me, It was always Willow who stepped forward, shielding me behind her. Back then, she always wore her hair in twin buns and loved wearing red dresses. In my eyes, she was like a little Neza, fearless and capable of anything. But she wasn't actually Neza. Once, while getting into a conflict with other kids because of me, she accidentally twisted her ankle. It clearly hurt a lot, yet with reddened eyes, she stubbornly refused to cry. That moment made my young heart tremble. From that time on, I made up my mind. I would protect her. For a lifetime. Back then, I didn't know how long a lifetime was. I only knew that I wanted to treat her well forever, to never let her suffer even the slightest grievance or injury. That was what I believed, and I did everything I could to live by it. Chapter 4. From kindergarten to elementary school, then middle school and high school, Willow and I were always in the same class. It wasn't a coincidence. My father and Willow's father had deliberately arranged it with the teachers. They hoped the two of us could look out for each other. Naturally, Willow and I were happy to go along with the good intentions of our two fathers. I was better at science subjects. Whenever there was a problem Willow didn't understand, I would break it down step by step and explain it to her patiently. And Willow, like a little housekeeper, would tirelessly urge me to memorize those dull and tedious English vocabulary words. Year after year, we dominated the top 2 spots in our grade rankings. On the very first day of high school, we made a promise to get into a university in Beijing together. I thought Willow and I would continue like that, steadily and predictably, and be together for a lifetime. Until the first semester of our second year of high school, a transfer student joined our class, Makoto. Back then, the school didn't have advanced placement classes. A single class could accommodate both top students like Willow and me, and also students like Makoto, an art student. I heard he could do street dance, and that he was quite talented. Whenever Willow talked to me about Makoto with sparkling eyes, I would always brush it off, even feeling a bit disdainful. What use was dancing for a high school student? Without strong academic performance, he still wouldn't get into a top university. At the end of the first semester, during New Year's Day, the school organized an art performance. If it weren't for the teachers requiring all students to attend in the auditorium, I would never have gone there to waste my time. But unexpectedly, the moment Makoto appeared on stage for the finale, he instantly pushed the atmosphere of the entire performance to its peak. There was no denying it, his performance was flawless. The dynamic music and powerful movements easily earned thunderous cheers from the audience. Among them, the screams from the girls were especially loud. At the end of the performance, Makoto struck what he thought was a cool "I love you" gesture toward the audience, causing another wave of excitement. I found such attention-seeking behavior incredibly childish, but when I turned my head, I saw, at some point, Willow had already stood up. Her bright eyes were locked onto Makoto, her pale face flushed red with nervous shyness, as if it could bleed. At that time, I didn't yet realize, her heart had already been captured by Makoto, nor did I know that the little gesture he had designed on stage had been meant for her all along. From that day on, Makoto began approaching Willow more and more, both intentionally and unintentionally. After the last class of the afternoon, he would be the first to help her get dinner. During evening study sessions, he often used excuses like asking questions or copying notes to invite her to sit beside him. For me in my previous life, how could I possibly allow someone to take Willow away from my side? That was why, the moment Makoto handed her the love letter, I decisively cut off any thoughts he shouldn't have had. Now that I had a second chance at life, and since I had already decided not to involve myself in Willow's life anymore, it was better to quietly remain just a passerby. Ever since that day, when she publicly acknowledged her relationship with Makoto in front of the entire class, Willow began to distance herself from me. High school life was demanding, with long days that stretched from early morning to late at night. In the past, Willow and I always went to and from school together, but from that day on, she never waited for me again. More than once, when I went downstairs in the morning, I saw Makoto riding a bicycle with Willow sitting behind him, the two of them disappearing into the distance. In the soft morning light, watching their intimate gestures and cheerful laughter, I thought I would feel angry, but to my surprise, all my emotions toward Willow were gradually settling, fading with time. Willow and Makoto grew closer and closer. She even took it upon herself to move from the front row to the back row, becoming his desk mate. The homeroom teacher spoke with Willow, but she only said she was helping the transfer student with his studies. The teacher had always valued her as a top student ranked second in the entire school, and worried that the atmosphere in the back row might affect her. In the end, the teacher firmly ordered her to move back to her original seat. Unhappy about spending less time with Makoto, Willow began asking for leave from evening study sessions every few days. Makoto, as an art student, didn't need to attend evening study. It was obvious they had moved their time together from inside the school to outside. At first, I didn't know where they were meeting, until one night, after evening study, I saw them, under the neon lights outside an internet cafe, standing by the roadside. The two of them were locked in a kiss. Unlike her pure image at school, Willow had begun wearing flashy accessories and heavy makeup to fit into Makoto's circle. If I hadn't grown up with her since childhood, if we hadn't lived together for over a decade, I would never have believed that the girl standing on those steps, with smoky eye makeup and the air of a rebellious delinquent girl, was Willow. Chapter 5. After more than a decade, I had forgotten much of what I learned in school. I had no choice but to work twice as hard every day to review, gradually regaining the feeling of being a student. By the midterm exams, I barely managed to hold onto my position as first in the grade without raising any suspicion. As for Willow, who had always ranked second, she unexpectedly dropped all the way to 159th place. After school, I saw Willow and her mother at the entrance of the residential compound. For a top student like Willow to fall so drastically, the homeroom teacher would definitely call in the parents. It only took a simple conversation for the truth to come out, that Willow had been using excuses to ask for leave while actually skipping classes. Aunt Lou scolded Willow as they walked. She had always been a gentle person, but this time she was so furious that her voice rose noticeably, drawing the attention of many people in the neighborhood. In contrast, Willow remained completely indifferent from beginning to end, as if the scolding wasn't directed at her at all. I didn't want to run into them, but just as I turned to leave, Aunt Lou noticed me. "George, wait a moment," she called out and hurried over, not even catching her breath before getting straight to the point. "You must know why Willow's grades dropped so badly this time, right? Tell me." Instinctively, I looked past her toward Willow behind her, only to meet a warning glare. In the end, I didn't tell Aunt Lou the truth. I made up an excuse to brush it off. She knew Willow and I had been close since childhood and could tell I was deliberately covering for her. Realizing she wouldn't get anything out of me, she didn't press further. With a sigh, she repeatedly asked me to help Willow more before finally turning to leave. Willow didn't follow her. Instead, she walked toward me. "Thanks." It had been a long time since she had spoken to me on her own. Her tone was stiff, even carrying a trace of roughness she herself didn't seem to notice. Looking at her face, so familiar it couldn't be more so, I wanted to say something, but she impatiently waved her hand. "I know what you're going to say. Save it. I don't want to hear it. Anyway, I'm definitely going to be with Makoto. I missed him in my last life. This time, I will never let go." My body jolted. I stared at her in disbelief, goosebumps rapidly rising along the back of my neck. Her once bright eyes were now slightly bloodshot from staying up late and wearing heavy makeup. A bit clouded, but still meeting my gaze without backing down. I never expected she had been reborn as well. If I still had even the faintest lingering feelings for the younger Willow, then the moment I realized she, too, had been reborn, that last trace of emotion completely vanished into nothing. Without Willow needing to do anything, I began to distance myself from her. Aside from attending classes, I avoided being in the same place as her whenever possible. I truly didn't want to see the soul beneath her youthful appearance, the same soul that had once personally taken my life. Even though I tried my best to avoid her, our childhood connection still made Makoto uneasy about me. One day after school, Makoto followed me into a secluded alley. He shoved me against the wall, pinning me there. Back then, I was physically weak and no match for someone like Makoto, who spent his days roaming the streets. He said, "I'm warning you, Willow is my woman now. You'd better not have any inappropriate thoughts about her." Listening to his childish, almost laughable declaration, I felt nothing at all. "Don't worry," I said calmly. "I only see Willow as a neighbor. Remember what you said." Satisfied with my answer, Makoto threw out a few more threats but didn't make things difficult for me. He turned and left. I watched as he reached the entrance of the alley. 7 or 8 boys gathered around him, following him as they left together. Chapter 6. Time passed quickly. In the blink of an eye, the final exams arrived. The final exam of the second semester of sophomore year carried special significance. Everyone in the class took it very seriously, frantically doing practice questions, hoping to secure a strong start for the upcoming senior year. Everyone, except Willow. When Makoto was out attending street dance classes, she spent most of her time lying on her desk, sleeping, completely uninterested in studying. Only when Makoto returned to class would she move closer to him, openly acting intimate as if no one else were around. The teacher spoke to her several times, but not only did she fail to refocus, she only became worse. She began skipping classes more and more openly. Other classmates said they had seen Willow going in and out of the dance studio where Makoto trained outside school. Willow had always been fresh-faced and pretty. In the past, she had good grades, a cheerful personality, and many friends in the class, including quite a few boys who secretly had a crush on her. But ever since she got together with Makoto, not only had her grades plummeted, she also got into conflicts with several female classmates over baseless jealousy. She even threatened to have some delinquent guys outside school teach them a lesson, acting completely like a rebellious troublemaker. Many classmates felt sorry for her drastic change, But under the pressure of heavy schoolwork, no one had the extra energy to pay much attention to her, including me. She had finally fallen from being the center of attention in the class to someone no one cared about anymore. Even the teachers were deeply disappointed in her and no longer tried to persuade her back onto the right path, simply letting her be. The day before the final exam, the school canceled evening study. As usual, I walked along the street, letting the cold winter wind clear the fatigue from my mind. Willow was standing at the entrance of the residential compound, blocking my path. George, This was the first time, across both my lives, that she hesitated like this when speaking to me. I could already guess that what she wanted to say had something to do with Makoto. I said nothing and quietly waited for her to continue. I didn't know how long she had been waiting there. Her cheeks were already red from the cold. Suddenly, I remembered how she used to complain about being afraid of the cold. After we got married in my previous life, I had fulfilled her wish and moved our home to the south, where the climate was warm all year round. Willow took a deep breath before finally speaking. "Lend me some money." What? I was stunned. Her parents, like mine, were employees of a state-owned enterprise. Their family had always been well off, and they had never been stingy with their only daughter. Why would she ask me for money? Then it occurred to me, it was probably because her recent behavior had been so poor that her parents couldn't accept it and had cut off her allowance. Trying to hide her embarrassment, Willow said, "Makoto passed the preliminary selection. Next week, I'm going with him to the capital for the second round of a street dance variety show." I nodded, said nothing, and took out the pocket money my parents had given me for the week. 50. That's all I have. Spending a small amount of money to give them more time alone, why not? Willow froze for a moment, clearly not expecting me to hand over the money so readily. "I thought you'd try to stop me," she said. "You're overthinking it." I smiled. Willow stared into my eyes, as if she wanted to say something more. Her lips moved slightly, but in the end, she said nothing. I pointed toward the entrance behind her and asked, "Can I go now? Makoto is very talented. He will definitely achieve his dreams." I smiled again. "Then I wish you both the best of luck." Willow thanked me a second time, then finally stepped aside. As we brushed past each other, we walked off in completely opposite directions. After a few steps, I suddenly stopped. For no particular reason, I turned my head to look back at her, just in time to see, not far away, her figure embracing Makoto as the two of them walked off together. Chapter 7. After the 2-day final exams ended, my parents booked plane tickets to take me on a beach vacation so I could relax. Just after we got off the plane, my mother received a call from Willow's mother. "What? Willow is missing." My mother's voice rose unconsciously out of concern for Aunt Lou, catching my attention. "Don't panic. Could she have gone to a classmate's house?" I walked beside my mother, dragging my luggage, quietly listening to their conversation. "What? Over 1,000 yuan is missing too? Don't jump to conclusions. If Willow took the money, that means she planned this trip. Maybe she just went out with friends to clear her head. She should be safe." My mother comforted Aunt Lou for quite a while before finally hanging up. As we left the airport, my mother suddenly asked me, "George, do you know where Willow went?" After more than 20 years of close relations, my parents and Willow's parents were practically family. Naturally, my mother was worried about her. Looking at the concern in her eyes, I didn't hide the truth. I told her Willow had likely gone out of town with a classmate to participate in a competition. My mother trusted me and immediately called back, relaying what I had said to Aunt Lou. With something like this happening to a close friend's family, my parents could no longer enjoy their vacation in peace. We hurriedly ended the trip and returned home. After we got back, I learned that Willow's parents had already reported her missing to the police. In just 3 or 4 days, the two of them seemed to have aged 10 years. A week later, one morning, I went downstairs to buy breakfast for my parents. On my way back, as I passed by Willow's door, I noticed it was slightly ajar, and loud arguing could be heard from inside. With a sharp smack, the door was suddenly flung open, and Willow rushed out. Her hair was messy, and she looked travel-worn. One side of her face was swollen and red, puffed up like a steamed bun. She clearly hadn't expected to run into me. She froze for a moment, then quickly ran downstairs. From inside came Aunt Lou's heartbroken sobs. I carried the breakfast upstairs and told my parents everything I had just seen. My mother sighed. "That child, Willow, we've watched her grow up. She used to be so sensible. How did she suddenly become so troubling?" My parents shook their heads in regret. Without even taking a bite of breakfast, they went downstairs to accompany Willow's parents. From my classmates, I learned that Makoto had been eliminated. His street dance might have stood out in a small, lower-tier city like ours, but on a more professional stage, it simply wasn't impressive. Willow had been brought back by her parents the next day. According to what my parents said, when they found her, she was in a small, shabby rental room, making breakfast for her boyfriend. Because she wasn't used to it, hot oil had splattered and burned her hands. My mother sighed again. What a pity. Your Aunt Lou has treated Willow like a precious gem since she was little, never letting her do any housework. And now, instead of studying properly, she's out there taking care of someone else. After saying that, my mother cautiously exchanged a glance with my father. Then the two of them looked at me at the same time, worried that I might feel upset hearing this. In the eyes of our open-minded parents, it had long been assumed that Willow and I would end up together, that after graduation, we would naturally get married and have children. I didn't show much reaction. I simply turned up the volume of my English listening practice and buried myself fully in solving problem sets. My parents exchanged looks again, then quietly left my room. Chapter 8. After being reborn, I gained a new plan for my life. To achieve my new goals, I still needed to put in even more effort. I focused on my own life, yet I couldn't help but piece together Willow's recent situation from my parents' fragmented conversations. After Willow was brought back, she argued with her parents every day. She was almost obsessive about wanting to drop out of school, working to earn money so she could support Makoto in pursuing his dreams. How could Mr. and Mrs. Liu just watch their daughter abandon a bright future and go down the wrong path? But no matter what they said or how harshly they scolded her, they couldn't bring Willow back to her senses. In the end, they had no choice but to take the most direct and forceful approach, locking her in her room. Yet Willow only became more stubborn, even threatening her parents with suicide. What happened after that? At the dinner table, my mother brought up Willow. Hesitating as she spoke, I picked up some food and, for once, joined the conversation. My mother put down her chopsticks and let out a long sigh. Willow wasn't seriously hurt, but when her parents took her to the hospital, she used the excuse of going to the restroom and ran off with that boy. No one knew where Willow had gone. Gradually, her name stopped appearing at our family's dinner table. While my mother felt regret for her, she also felt a trace of relief. At least such a rebellious and willful girl hadn't married into our Wong family. I heard about Willow again after the midterm exams of the first semester of senior year. During a break between classes, I saw Willow and her parents at the entrance of the Academic Affairs building. The early autumn weather was still hot. Willow wore a thin outfit, and although it was loose-fitting, I could still see the changes in her figure and posture. After all, in my previous life, I had stayed by her side the entire time she was pregnant with 2 children, even though those children had nothing to do with me. Sure enough, that evening after school, I unintentionally overheard my parents talking about Willow again. My mother said, "She's pregnant, about 3 or 4 months along. An abortion would be too harmful to her body, so the baby has to be kept. If she doesn't drop out, then what? Is she really going to take care of a child while preparing for the college entrance exam?" Noticing that I had returned, my mother immediately stopped talking and went to the kitchen to prepare a late-night snack for me. Only my father looked at me and let out a helpless sigh. Chapter 9. In the second half of senior year, as the college entrance exam drew closer day by day, everyone gave it their all to face this first major battle of life. Having already lived through it once, the exam didn't feel that frightening to me, but I still gave it everything I had. My phone was already old, so at the start of the semester, my parents bought me a new one. They trusted that I wouldn't get distracted, and they also didn't want me to be under too much pressure, but I only used it to practice even more problems. The only social app one had was WeChat. The moment I logged in the empty chat list, there was a friend request notification. From the silhouette in the backlit profile picture, I immediately recognized it. It was Willow. Ever since she had made her relationship with Makoto public in class, she had deleted me right away. I didn't expect that after a year, she would take the initiative to add me again. I didn't accept the request, but for some reason, I opened her moments. Just like before, her moments were completely public, allowing me to easily glimpse into her recent life. She posted very frequently, sometimes 2 or 3 times a day, and almost all of it was about being with Makoto, holding hands, hugging, taking selfies, eating together, and even videos of their sweet interactions. Her most recent posts were selfies of the 2 of them under the neon lights of a night market. It was still cold in the northern nights of early March. She leaned against Makoto, her smile looking sweet. The caption read, "Cute handmade accessories, 9 for 3. Come find us at the night market." I zoomed in on the photo and noticed that the lower part of the image showed a corner of a handmade jewelry stall. Calculating the time, she should have only recently given birth. Even if she had to work, she should still be on maternity leave. Yet instead of resting at home, she was out there running a street stall. I glanced at the time, 10:30 p.m. For some reason, a sudden urge arose in me to go take a look at the night market. Fortunately, that thought faded away almost instantly. I put down my phone and, while it was still early, buried myself in another set of physics practice problems. Time passed, neither too fast nor too slow, and once again, I faced the college entrance exam. I performed as usual. After the last subject ended, as I walked out of the exam hall and saw the familiar scene, I couldn't help but pause for a moment. In my previous life, Willow and I had been assigned to the same test center, just in different rooms. After the exam, I found her immediately and, without caring about anyone around us, lifted her into my arms and spun her around in excitement. Back then, she had been just as relaxed, letting me hold her, even letting me, in my exhilaration, plant a light kiss on her cheek. "George, our top student, how do you think you did this time?" My desk mate, who had taken the exam in another room, interrupted my thoughts. I smiled, responded to him, and left together with him, and that past gradually became blurred. After the exam, my parents arranged several vacation options for me to choose from. I picked none of them and instead slept solidly for 2 days and 2 nights. After waking up, I took advantage of my father's annual leave to go back to our hometown with him and stayed with my grandparents for a few days. I had always loved rural life, and with my grandparents' unconditional pampering, I almost didn't want to leave. But after only a few days, I received a call from my desk mate. He told me Willow was getting married, and asked us to come back and attend her wedding. Hearing this news, I thought I might feel something, but my heart was like a summer breeze, without even the slightest ripple. I arranged to go with a few classmates, and together we headed to the address on the invitation, Willow's current home, which was also Makoto's hometown. After being reborn, I had imagined what kind of life Willow might live in this life, but I never expected her final destination to be here. We took a high-speed train, then transferred to a bus when there was no transportation left. We even hitched a ride on a local villager's electric tricycle. Only then did we finally arrive at Willow's home before noon. Chapter 10. As soon as we entered the village, we saw a red balloon arch from afar. It looked quite grand, but up close, we realized that behind the arch were only 2 old brick houses. The courtyard, however, was spacious, with small groups of relatives and fellow villagers gathered around. The moment I stepped inside, I immediately spotted the bride in a white wedding dress among the crowd. As if sensing something, Willow turned her head, and her eyes met mine. Someone said, "Oh, these must be Makoto's classmates. Come, this way." Makoto's relatives warmly ushered us further into the courtyard. Step by step, I got closer and closer to her. I could tell at a glance that the wedding dress she wore was of poor quality. The design was plain, and even the size didn't fit properly. The shoulders hung loose, while the waist and abdomen were slightly tight. In that instant, I realized she was probably pregnant again. Sensing my gaze, Willow instinctively used the red leather handbag in her hand to cover her stomach. My eyes unconsciously moved upward, settling on her face. I couldn't deny it, my heart still trembled for a moment. But it wasn't affection, it was shock. On that familiar face, I could no longer find even a trace of the person I once knew. The cheap makeup couldn't conceal the dullness and roughness of her skin. The exhaustion in her eyes and the fine lines at the corners of her mouth revealed her poor condition. She was only 20, yet she looked as worn as someone in their 30s or 40s. No, in my previous life, under my care, with the help of luxury skincare products, even at 36, her skin had remained as smooth and delicate as a baby's. Her students had even preferred to call her older sister in private. Perhaps my gaze was too direct. Makoto, dressed in a black suit, stepped in front of me, blocking my view. After returning home from Willow's wedding, I received an acceptance letter from my dream university. In this life, the choices I made for my application and major were completely different from my previous life. Back then, to accommodate Willow, I had deliberately chosen the school she liked and picked a major I didn't enjoy, but one with excellent prospects. Also that after graduation, I could give her a better life. But this time, I chose to live for myself. I applied to a top-tier medical university, fulfilling my own dream of saving lives. My parents were proud of me. They booked a grand banquet hall in the city center and held a lavish celebration, inviting all our relatives and friends. Willow's parents also attended. It had been a long time since I last saw them. Willow's mother, once a slightly plump, round-faced woman who looked blessed and kind, had grown thin like a withered stick. Her hair had turned much grayer as well. "George, Auntie has always known you're an outstanding child. Congratulations." She patted my shoulder. For some reason, that gesture made me think of my previous life, when I married Willow. Back then, she had also patted my shoulder, smiling as she told me to change how I addressed her, to call her Mom. Looking at me now, Aunt Lou fell into a long silence. After a while, her eyes reddened, and she let out a soft sigh. If only she hadn't gone down the wrong path, perhaps she would have been like you today, admitted into her dream university, walking a completely different road. Chapter 11. I entered university and threw myself into intense academic work and club activities. I rarely heard Willow's name anymore. On the rare occasions I thought of her, she only felt more and more unfamiliar. As I had wished, I joined the university's debate club. In my previous life, I had loved that kind of sharp verbal sparring, the thrill of defending my views and defeating others. Unfortunately, Back then Willow didn't like me being in the debate club. She always said she hoped I would follow trends instead, urging me to join the street dance club or the rap club, but I had never been interested in music or dance. In the end, I was eliminated during the selection process. At the same time, I missed the debate club tryouts as well. Disappointed, I lost all interest in club activities throughout my entire college life. Fortunately, in this life, I no longer had to consider anyone else's opinion. I could live for myself again. Midway through the first semester, the faculty held a debate competition. With my own ability, I secured the position of third speaker. In the finals, the opposing team's third speaker went head-to-head with me. Unfortunately for her, by the end of the debate, perhaps due to insufficient preparation, her arguments were completely dismantled by me. The opposing third speaker was a girl. In the moment she fell silent, her fair face flushed red, and her bright eyes widened like a startled kitten. At that moment, standing on the debate stage, I couldn't help but let out a soft laugh. In the end, our team won the championship. It was clear the opposing team had been determined to take the title, but unfortunately, they had met us. After the event, my teammates and I left the venue full of youthful pride. The 4 debaters from the opposing side followed behind us, their presence noticeably dimmer. Only the girl named Anna, the third speaker, kept glaring at me with those round, bright eyes from time to time. I found it amusing and turned back to look at her a few more times. Perhaps my face irritated her too much, so much that she failed to watch her step. She missed a step and fell down the stairs. I wasn't far from her, and with my height advantage, I managed to catch her just in time, saving her from the pain of falling. When Anna pulled herself out of my arms, her dark eyes were filled with anger, embarrassment, and a trace of confusion. Then she hurriedly ran away, so fast, as if I were some big bad wolf chasing after her. After the debate competition, life returned to its usual rhythm. The coursework in medical school was extremely demanding. Every day, my routine revolved around 4 places: dormitory, classroom, cafeteria, and library. At some point, I began to notice that wherever I went, Anna seemed to appear as well. At first, I thought it was just a coincidence, but after a few awkward exchanges, Anna gradually became familiar with me, on her own initiative. During large lectures or in the library, she would always save me the best seats in advance. In the cafeteria, she would enthusiastically help me get food, sparing me from long lines, and the dishes she chose were always my favorites. She was the only girl, across both my lifetimes, besides Willow, whom I had grown close to. That's when I realized I didn't actually know how to interact with girls. All I could do was clumsily return her kindness, buying snacks and bringing them to her dorm, treating her to meals, or taking her to the movies or an amusement park. Back and forth like that, we grew closer and closer, ridiculously. During the seasonal change at the end of the semester, I caught a cold. Anna somehow convinced the dorm supervisor and simply claimed to be my girlfriend. For several days in a row, she came to my dorm to take care of me, even braving heavy rain to buy medicine for me. I recovered, but she nearly fell ill herself. My roommates jokingly started calling her sister-in-law. Only then did I belatedly realize she had been pursuing me. Having experienced betrayal from the person closest to me, I had always been afraid to start a new relationship. Moreover, her personality, bright, cheerful, carefree, was very similar to Willow's in the past. But I knew she was herself. I shouldn't treat her as a substitute for anyone. That wouldn't be fair to her. At the end of the first semester of freshman year, the long winter break arrived, and my time with her came to an abrupt stop. After returning home, I realized that my heart felt strangely empty. Only then did I understand. I had already fallen for this girl who shone like a little sun. On February 14th, Valentine's Day, which also happened to be the first day of the Lunar New Year, I managed to grab a high-speed train ticket and went straight to her city. The moment she saw me downstairs at her home, she gasped in surprise and rushed into my arms without hesitation. That was when we officially became a couple. We spent the entire day together in her city, even doing nothing, even in the biting cold. Everything felt warm and sweet. After dinner, I reluctantly said goodbye to her and took the late train back home. Chapter 12. I woke up a bit late the next morning. Willow's parents had already come to my house to pay a New Year visit. My father and Willow's father were drinking tea in the living room, while Aunt Lou was in the kitchen with my mother, chatting as they prepared vegetables. After washing up, I went to the dining area to look for something to eat. I saw that my mom had left me a plate of dumplings on the table, still warm, so I picked up my chopsticks and started eating. But unintentionally, I overheard Aunt Lou pouring out her worries to my mother. It had been half a year since I last heard anything about Willow. She said, "Willow's life hasn't been easy. She's had 2 daughters in a row, and the second one was born prematurely. Her health has suffered because of it, and her mother-in-law isn't easy to get along with. She doesn't like her, and she dislikes the 2 girls even more. She refuses to help take care of them for even a day. I offered to help, but Willow is too stubborn. She refuses to come back and let me. That Makoto has no sense of responsibility, no capability. He doesn't even have a stable job and refuses to endure hardship. Old Lou lowered himself to help him find a job, but he couldn't even last a single day. My poor Willow, she was raised like a treasure by her father and me. Now she has to take care of 2 children and work to support the family. As her mother, it breaks my heart to see this. My mother wiped her tears along with Aunt Lou, deeply saddened by Willow's current situation. Listening to her words, I fell into a brief daze. Willow had been reborn too, yet she had chosen such a difficult path. Did she regret it? Just as I was thinking, the dumpling in my hand slipped and fell, hitting the edge of the plate with a soft clatter. Only then did Aunt Lou notice that I was there as well. She wiped her tears and walked out of the kitchen. Looking at me, she couldn't help but sigh. Back then, everyone in the neighborhood thought you and Willow would end up together. You grew up together, and you were so close. If you two had really been together, how wonderful that would have been. I didn't know what the point of saying this was anymore. I smiled faintly and interrupted her. Aunt Lou, I already have a girlfriend. Next New Year, I'll bring her back to visit you and Uncle Lou. Willow's mother looked at me for a long moment, her expression complicated. Then she forced a smile and returned to the kitchen to continue chatting with my mother. But this time, their conversation no longer revolved around Willow. In the second half of my sophomore year, my father was promoted and transferred for work, and our whole family moved to the provincial capital. To afford a new house in the new city, we sold our old home here to a distant relative, and gradually, we lost contact with Willow's family. Chapter 13. On the 3rd day of the Lunar New Year in my senior year, I went to the high-speed rail station to pick up Anna and bring her home to meet my parents. I was nervous, but to my surprise, the moment they met her, my parents immediately took a strong liking to her. Anna was pretty and adorable, lively and quick-witted, very easy to like. At the dinner table, my mom kept praising her, saying the more she looked at her, the more she liked her. I pretended to be dissatisfied and said, "Mom, you can't just keep praising her. It's the new year, say something nice about me too." My mom laughed and placed a fisheye into my bowl. Yes, I should praise you too. My son really has good taste, bringing me such a wonderful daughter-in-law. Anna's fair cheeks instantly flushed red, looking radiant and full of life. I had already met Anna's parents beforehand and gotten their permission to have her stay at my house for a few days. That night, my mom replaced the bedding in my room with brand new sheets and blankets, and mercilessly threw my own quilt onto the couch in the living room. She said, "Let me tell you, Anna is a good girl. You absolutely must not bully her." Anna overheard my mom's warning and gave me a playful wink and grin. Seeing her mischievous expression made me want to bite her on the spot. As soon as my mom returned to her room, Anna quickly locked the door, leaving me alone in the living room, staring speechlessly at the ceiling. The next day was a high school reunion. I had received the invitation half a month in advance. Unexpectedly, Anna wanted to go with me, saying she wanted to learn what I had been like in the past through my classmates. She had always been quirky and full of ideas, and I was more than happy to have her come along. When we arrived at the hotel, Anna said she needed to go to the restroom to touch up her makeup. As I stood at the entrance waiting for her, I saw a man and a woman walking toward me from a distance. Only when they got closer did I recognize them. The man was Makoto, and the woman was Willow. It had been many years since I last saw her, and she had aged even more. The exhaustion on her face was impossible to hide. It was hard to imagine she and Anna were the same age, yet their conditions were worlds apart, as if separated by a generation. "George," Willow called out softly. Makoto immediately shot her a harsh glare. Willow flinched, then forced a smile to cover her embarrassment. Makoto spoke in a rough tone. "Go buy me a pack of cigarettes." Willow didn't respond, though she tried to hide it. I could still see the fear in her eyes when she looked at him. "What are you standing there for? Go already." Willow nodded submissively and walked toward the hotel entrance. Once she left, Makoto's hostility toward me only grew stronger. He sized me up from head to toe, then let out a cold laugh, revealing slightly yellowed teeth. "Well, if it isn't top student Wong, long time no see." Back then, he had been a standout figure on campus, rebellious and handsome. Now, he was still the same person, but he no longer had anything to support that arrogance. I gave a slight nod and simply responded with an Makoto was clearly dissatisfied with my reaction. Suddenly, he stepped forward and stared straight into my eyes. "George, let me tell you, drop whatever ideas you've got. Don't think I don't know what you're planning. Willow can only ever be my wife. She's already given me 2 kids. If you're thinking of waiting for her, try your luck in your next life." Chapter 14. Looking at his ridiculous expression, I couldn't help but let out a mocking laugh. Makoto clenched his fists, but in the end, he didn't dare throw a punch at me. At that moment, Anna walked out of the restroom. She was sharp, at a glance. She sensed the tension between Makoto and me. She immediately looped her arm through mine and said in a coquettish tone, "George, aren't you going to introduce me? Who is this?" I smiled and said, "This is my high school classmate, Makoto. Makoto, this is my girlfriend, Anna." The moment I finished speaking, I noticed Willow, who had just come back from outside, pause for a brief second. Makoto noticed her too, impatiently. He snatched the cigarette pack from her hand and lit one, as if completely unaware of the awkward tension between them. Anna continued, "Which university are you attending? You should be seniors like us, right? Have you thought about graduate school?" Willow and Makoto remained silent. Anna went on, "George and I have already discussed it. We're not planning to take the graduate exam. Instead, we've decided to go abroad for further studies in the second half of the year." Anna chatted casually as if she were already familiar with them, while Makoto could only keep smoking to cover up his discomfort. In the end, he found an excuse and went upstairs early, not forgetting to roughly drag along Willow, whose face had turned pale. Watching their figures disappear, Anna gave a sly blink, then took my hand and led me into the private room for the reunion. By the time the gathering ended, it was already evening. Anna and I walked hand in hand along the brightly lit streets. "George, your taste back then was really questionable. How did you know?" By now, I could calmly face what had happened between Willow and me in my previous life, but I had no idea how this girl had found out that I once liked Willow. Anna didn't answer directly. Instead, she pinched my arm hard. I laughed. "I think I smell a strong scent of vinegar. Did you knock over a bottle of it at the reunion?" Startled, Anna quickly grabbed her clothes and sniffed them, only to realize I was teasing her. She knew exactly where my weakness was. She started pinching the sensitive spots on my waist again and again. It didn't hurt, just tickled. I burst into laughter and dodged her nimbly. The little girl stomped her feet in frustration. "I'm not jealous. I'm absolutely not." Chapter 15. After graduating smoothly from university, Anna and I went abroad together to continue our studies. In a foreign country where we knew no one, we became each other's support and motivation. We moved in together, studying while building a warm, vibrant life of our own. Over the course of 3 years, instead of exhausting our relationship, we grew even more inseparable. Both of our families had long since accepted our relationship. After finishing our studies and returning home, I had just settled into a job when our 4 parents eagerly arranged a grand wedding for us. The wedding invited all of our close classmates and friends. What I didn't expect was, Willow and Makoto showed up as well. It seemed Willow had made a special effort to dress up for my wedding. However, no amount of heavy makeup could hide the weariness of her appearance or the fragile, defeated state of her spirit. From the very beginning, Makoto kept holding her hand, as if they were deeply in love, but anyone with eyes could tell that wasn't the case. During the toast, I raised my glass and drank it in one go. My classmates joked about my strong alcohol tolerance and followed suit. It was then I noticed, beneath Willow's raised arm, there were several overlapping scars, old and new, stretching deep into her sleeve, jagged and unsettling. After the toast, I told Anna, now my wife, about what I had seen. Not long after, she found a chance to speak with Willow alone in the restroom. "Willow, if you need help, you can tell me. George and I can both help you." After the wedding banquet ended and we returned to our new home, Anna finally told me what had happened. At the time, Willow's expression had been complicated: suspicion, tension, fear, regret, and a deep unwillingness. But in the end, she said nothing and quietly left my wedding at some point. After the wedding leave ended, I officially devoted myself to the sacred work of being a doctor. My wife also began preparing to establish her own studio. Although I had a high level of education, I still lacked practical experience, so I had to start from the ground up. I began to truly understand what it meant to be so busy your feet barely touched the ground. The next time I saw Willow was several months later. That night, I was on duty in the emergency department when a woman was rushed in through the corridor, groaning in pain. My colleagues and I immediately moved forward to provide emergency treatment. Her abdomen was large, she was pregnant, but her stomach was covered in horrifying bruises, and blood was continuously seeping out beneath her, soaking through the sheets. After examination, we found the fetus was already 8 months along. Working together with the obstetrics team, we managed to save the baby's life. It was a girl, tiny, wrinkled, waving her clenched little fists as if greeting this unfamiliar world. But sadly, there was no joy from family to welcome her, no tenderness from her mother, only the sterile incubator in the neonatal ward. After the child was delivered, the mother's uterine bleeding would not stop. The doctors present raced against time and decided on the only life-saving option: a hysterectomy. I was responsible for speaking with her family, but when I stepped out of the operating room, I discovered the person standing outside was Makoto, whom I hadn't seen in a long time. He was startled when he saw me, then hesitantly asked, "How is Willow?" Willow? That's right. I had been so focused on saving the patient that I hadn't carefully looked at the pale face beneath the sweat-soaked, disheveled hair. I never expected that woman was Willow. I remembered my mother once mentioning casually that, in order to give her children a better life, Willow had come to this big city full of opportunities to work hard. I never imagined that in such a vast city, we would meet again like this. I truthfully explained Willow's current condition to Makoto. He fell silent for a long time without giving an answer. I couldn't help urging him. Every second you delay means more danger for Willow. No. Makoto still couldn't make a decision. Instead, an elderly woman who had rushed over suddenly stepped between us. She said, "A hysterectomy? No, I won't allow it." Chapter 16. Looking at the old woman's face, I recalled seeing her once at Willow's wedding. She was Willow's mother-in-law. She shouted angrily, "I just checked, another girl. A useless burden. If she can't give birth to a son, then she'll just keep giving birth. If her uterus is removed, how is she supposed to have more children? It can't be done." Her attitude was domineering and overbearing. She turned to her son and sternly warned, "I'm telling you, you are not allowed to sign." A nurse came out of the operating room to urge them, saying the patient's condition was critical and the consent form had to be signed immediately. Watching the stubborn mother and son, I felt an overwhelming sorrow for Willow, who was lying on the operating table, fighting for her life. I asked the nurse to stay in the corridor to hold them off, while I quickly contacted Willow's parents through my mother. Fortunately, in the past 2 years, in order to help their suffering daughter, Aunt Lou, already retired, had also moved to this city. Before long, my mother and Aunt Lou arrived at the hospital. Supported by my mother, Aunt Lou signed her name with trembling hands. Seeing that they could no longer stop Willow's mother, Makoto's mother began shouting, crying, and making a scene, trying to disrupt the medical staff as they fought to save Willow. In the end, the mother and son were escorted out of the hospital by security. Several hours later, Willow's life was finally saved. From beginning to end, neither Makoto nor his mother ever returned to the hospital to see her. That mother and son are truly heartless. No matter what, there's still a baby in the incubator. Don't they care about the child at all? Sometimes, I would hear emotional young nurses whispering about Willow in bed number 3, but I never joined their conversations. To me, Willow was just a patient. Perhaps her fate was indeed unfortunate, but I was only an ordinary doctor. I could heal the sick, but I could never save a life already rotting from within. When Willow was discharged, it happened quietly. The premature baby, whose condition had stabilized earlier, had already been taken out of the incubator and brought home by Willow's parents. I never saw the child again. More than a year later, my wife and I had a child of our own. When she was 4 or 5 months pregnant, she came to our hospital for a prenatal checkup. A colleague even helped take a few detailed ultrasound images of the baby. Before the new year, my wife and I went back to my parents' house for dinner. My mother held the ultrasound images. Looking at them again and again, she sighed in admiration. "Look at that tiny little face. Those delicate features, it's exactly like George when he was little." Hearing her words, I gently placed my hand on my wife's steadily growing belly, unable to hide the excitement and anticipation in my heart. I had always loved children, and now, after living through 2 lifetimes, I finally had a child who truly belonged to me. During the meal, my mother watched the loving interaction between my wife and me and couldn't help but let out a soft sigh. "Seeing how happy you two are as a couple, I feel incredibly relieved. It's a good thing your father and I didn't rush to push you and Willow together back then." She brought up Willow again. My wife and I exchanged a glance. Then she said, "That child, Willow, has always been stubborn. Once she chose a path, she wouldn't turn back until she hit the very end. It's a pity, now that she wants to turn back, it's already too late." Chapter 17. It turned out that when Willow had been hospitalized while pregnant and injured, leading to her child being born prematurely, it was because her husband, Makoto, had gone into a drunken frenzy and kicked her in the stomach. After going through a life-and-death ordeal, Willow finally made up her mind to divorce him once she was discharged, but the moment she returned home, she overheard Makoto and his mother plotting to seize the old house that belonged to her parents. When they realized she was back, Makoto's mother first put on a fake show of concern, but between the lines, she was clearly urging Willow to help them take over her parents' house. The people Willow felt most indebted to in her life were her parents. There was no way she would agree to such shameless demands from this mother and son. Makoto hadn't expected that his always submissive wife, the one who used to put him above everything and never dared to speak up, would refuse him. Without even needing his mother to stir things up, he raised his hand and slapped Willow across the face. Deep down, Willow still retained a trace of the pride she once had as a favored daughter of heaven. After reaching complete disappointment, she fought back against Makoto for the first time. Perhaps years of resentment had already seeped into her bones, or perhaps Makoto's long-term alcoholism had ruined his body. Having just been discharged from the hospital, Willow still managed to muster all her strength to subdue her husband, leaving him unable to stand again, unable to continue bossing her around or treating her like a punching bag. Seeing her son lying motionless and covered in blood, Makoto's mother was nearly driven mad with fear and fled the house. The neighbors called the police. By the time the police arrived, Willow had already taken a quick wash in the bathroom. Her usually messy hair was neatly tied up, revealing a forehead lined with fine wrinkles that had appeared at some unknown point. Only then did the neighbors realize that, ignoring her overly gaunt cheeks and the countless scars on her pale skin, this poor woman, who had been abused daily by her husband and mother-in-law, was actually very beautiful. Willow was imprisoned. Anna and I used our connections to find a well-known lawyer in the province, and through our parents, we introduced him to Willow's family. With the lawyer's full effort in defending her, Willow was ultimately sentenced to 6 years. That was already the best possible outcome. In the season when spring blossoms were in full bloom, I finally took a rare break, only to accompany my wife back to the hospital where she worked for a routine prenatal checkup. The obstetrics colleagues said that in just over a month, our child would be arriving in this world. After leaving the hospital, we went to a maternity and baby store to buy some more tiny clothes and toys for our soon-to-arrive child. Before we even made it home, I received a call from Willow's father. He said Willow wanted to see me. I didn't want to go at first, but then I suddenly felt that the entanglement between Willow and me across 2 lifetimes deserved a proper ending. So I agreed. Today happened to be visitation day, and it was also my rare day off. After discussing it with my wife, we didn't go home, we drove straight to the suburban prison. After registering and passing through multiple procedures, we entered the visitation room, where Willow was already sitting behind the glass wall waiting for me. When she saw me, she instinctively tried to stand up, but then slumped back down in defeat. I sat across from her and picked up the receiver. Her dry lips trembled as she spoke in a hoarse, choked voice. "George. I'm sorry. I regret it." I smiled faintly and said calmly, "It's all in the past." It had been a long time since I last thought about my previous life, but seeing her face inevitably brought back many memories. I remembered how, back then, I always had endless things to tell her, about work, about life. Even trivial things like sneezing twice while walking down the street. I couldn't help but share everything with her. Her expression was always indifferent. Only when something interested her would she respond with a few words. At the time, I thought she had simply grown up and matured, which was why she had become less talkative. I would even go out of my way to cheer her up, just hoping she would talk to me a little more. What I didn't know was that, from beginning to end, she had never loved me. To her, everything I said was nothing more than noise she couldn't tune out. Now, Willow sat behind the glass wall, her dim eyes filled with unspoken words, yet I no longer had any desire to understand them. Chapter 18. I waited for her for a moment. Seeing that she still didn't speak, a trace of impatience rose in my heart. I thought, let's just end it here. So I hung up the phone and stood up to leave. Unexpectedly, she suddenly sprang to her feet and slammed her hands hard against the glass wall, calling for me to turn back. The glass was well soundproofed. It wasn't until I saw the prison guard in the corner move that I realized what was happening. When I turned around, I saw her being firmly pressed back into her seat. I had no choice but to sit down again. Seeing that she had calmed down, the guard released her and returned to his post. She watched me pick up the receiver again, staring straight into my eyes. On the other side, she questioned me urgently, almost hysterically. George, you were reborn too, weren't you? You came back to life too, right?" I looked into her eyes and gave no clear answer. She continued, "It must be true, it has to be. Otherwise, why wouldn't you love me in this life? Why didn't you save me? Why?" Watching her hysterical state, I almost felt like laughing, but I still gave her a serious answer. I said, "Everyone in this world has to take responsibility for their own choices. In the previous life, I chose you, and I paid for it with my life. In this life, you chose Makoto, so you must bear the consequences that come with that choice." A ray of sunlight streamed in through the small window on the wall, falling perfectly on Willow's pale, almost translucent face. For a brief moment, it felt as if I could see a trace of the girl she once was. She didn't speak for a long time. The receiver slipped from her hand, yet she seemed not to notice, only staring at me in a daze. This time, after I hung up the phone, I stood up and left without looking back. The parking lot was some distance away. I walked along the road toward the car. From afar, I saw Anna standing by the car, waiting for me. She saw me too, raised her arm, and waved. The boredom in her eyes was instantly replaced with a vibrant brilliance. I quickened my pace. Then, before I knew it, I broke into a run. The sunlight was dazzling, the spring breeze gentle, the person I love was waiting for me ahead, and the shackles that once bound me had already been cast off. Step by step, walking along the path I chose, my steps had never felt so light. Willow Extra 1. Willow never thought she would see Makoto again. On the day she was reborn, she received a love letter from him. The bold, dark handwriting was simple and direct. "Will you be my girlfriend?" After living through 2 lifetimes, hearing his confession once more, Willow couldn't find a single reason to refuse. In front of the entire class, she said yes, to be able to see Makoto again. Willow felt that everything she had done was worth it. She gave up the academic achievements she had once been so proud of in her previous life, gave up her bright and promising future. She wanted nothing else, only to walk through this life hand in hand with Makoto. So, not long after they started dating, Willow gave herself to him without reservation, to support him in going to the capital to participate in a street dance competition. She swallowed her pride and begged George, whom she had already cut ties with, for money. She even stole cash from her own home. Unfortunately, Makoto was eliminated in just the first round of the semi-finals. Unwilling to see him discouraged, Willow promised him that no matter what, she would always support him as long as he needed it. She was willing to give everything. But soon after, she was taken back home by her parents to stop her from being with Makoto. They cruelly locked her up. She barely managed to escape by using a suicide attempt as an opportunity to be sent to the hospital, but by doing so, she lost all her remaining options. What she didn't know was that Makoto, who had always taken pride in his dancing skills, could not accept the blow of failure. Deep down, resentment began to grow. If she hadn't been clinging to him all the time, how could he have been distracted? How could he have lost such an easy opportunity? They still ended up living together, in Makoto's small rented apartment. In her previous life, George had never let Willow do a single household chore. Now, every trivial matter had to be handled by Willow herself, and she actually found joy in it. But they were both young and unemployed. Life quickly became financially strained. Makoto spent less and less time at home. When Willow asked where he had gone, she barely got the words out before he snapped back at her. "Where else could I go? Of course I'm trying to figure out how to make money," he said, before slamming the door behind him. Willow didn't blame him. She only blamed herself for not being able to get them out of their predicament. During the following period, Willow's health began to decline. One night, she could no longer endure it. Makoto happened to be out, so she searched through all his friends before finally managing to reach him. Before the phone was even handed to Makoto, Willow heard his voice through the deafening music in the background. Makoto said, "What girlfriend? If it weren't for that bet I made with you guys, I would never have bothered chasing her. Who knew it'd be so easy?" Honestly, aside from her face, she's got nothing going for her. Sooner or later, Makoto, his friend, immediately cut him off and handed him the phone. Seeing the caller ID, Makoto's girlfriend, he reluctantly took the phone and asked, "Why are you calling here?" Willow wasn't sick. She was pregnant. At first, she didn't know. She hadn't taken care of herself properly, which led to an unstable pregnancy. And since it was already too far along, she couldn't terminate it. She had no choice but to keep the child. Keeping the baby and recovering her health both required money. With no other options, she could only contact her parents. After a fierce argument, it was her parents who eventually gave in. Her mother took her to school to handle the withdrawal procedures. It happened to be between classes, and from a distance, Willow saw George standing among her classmates. After just a few months apart, he had grown taller and leaner. Willow suddenly realized that he was actually more handsome than Makoto, and the hatred and disgust she once felt toward him had long since disappeared without her even noticing. Throughout her pregnancy, Willow took care of herself. Makoto was rarely home. Willow didn't ask, and he never said where he had been. Willow extra too. It wasn't until the day before she went into labor that Makoto's mother finally showed up at the hospital, carrying a basket of eggs. After hours of labor, Willow gave birth to a lovely baby girl. When the nurse carried the baby out of the delivery room, Makoto's mother heard that it was a girl. She didn't even bother to take a look. She turned and left the hospital immediately, not forgetting to take the basket of eggs with her. When the baby was 4 or 5 months old, Willow and Makoto finally got married. The wedding was held in Makoto's hometown, simple and crude. Only then did Willow learn that Makoto's mother was just a vegetable vendor. To support Makoto's studies in the city and his dance training, she had already exhausted everything she had. Her mother-in-law had always looked down on Willow. Not only did she resent her for leading her son astray, but she also despised her for failing to give birth to a son. Even in front of relatives and guests from the village, her mother-in-law showed Willow no respect. What Willow didn't expect was that she would see George at the wedding. Flustered, she instinctively covered her slightly swollen belly again, only to turn and catch the provocative look Makoto shot at George. It turned out that Makoto had invited him. After being with Makoto for over a year, he had achieved nothing in any aspect of his life, yet his arrogance had only grown more blatant. He walked over with Willow and said in a voice only the three of them could hear, "George, so what if you got into a top university? The woman you like is now giving me children." Willow felt utterly humiliated, but what she found even harder to accept was that George, who once had eyes only for her, remained completely unmoved by the provocation. His dark eyes were like an ancient well, calm and devoid of any ripples. After having 2 children, the burden on the family grew heavier. Makoto did nothing and refused to do anything, aside from occasionally asking his mother for a bit of living expenses. All the household costs were supported solely by Willow working herself to exhaustion. Only then did she realize that during her pregnancy, Makoto hadn't been going out to make money at all. He had been drinking and fooling around with his useless friends. The little money he brought back had actually been secretly given by Willow's mother, who couldn't bear to see her daughter suffer. Makoto drank more and more frequently. At some point, whenever he got drunk, he began to lose his temper and lash out. Their 2 daughters were often terrified to tears by their father's twisted rage, but Makoto didn't care in the slightest. Willow could only protect her daughters while trying her best to preserve their father's image in their eyes. Makoto didn't appreciate it. One day, after getting drunk, he beat her viciously, venting all the resentment he had accumulated over the years. Willow was stunned. She had given up everything, even herself, to choose him. Yet what she received in return was nothing but his hatred. Finally, one time, during Makoto's escalating violence, Willow, pregnant again, was beaten so badly that she was sent to the hospital. After an intense rescue effort, she barely managed to survive. One night during her hospitalization, Willow woke from a dream at midnight, her pillow soaked with tears. In the dream, George, her, and their children were together in their once spacious and bright home, filled with laughter, peaceful and beautiful. In the darkness, trembling, she fumbled for her phone and dialed the number she had never forgotten. A mechanical female voice coldly informed her that the man who once loved her with his whole being had long since been destroyed by her own hands. Willow covered her face and wept. During her more than 1 month in the hospital, neither Makoto nor her mother-in-law came to see her even once. It was her own mother who stayed by her side, taking care of her. Willow knew she had already failed her parents, their love, their hopes, but she still had to make an even more unreasonable request. Having brushed against death, Willow was finally completely awake. Time and again, her weakness had only led to escalating cruelty. She asked her mother to temporarily take care of her premature 3rd child, while she made up her mind to return and divorce Makoto, and then take her 2 older daughters away. Escaping that terrifying home, Willow Extra 3, dragging her weak, recovering body, Willow returned home, only to overhear that mother and son plotting to take her parents' old house. Makoto's mother was saying, "Anyway, she can't have children anymore. Sooner or later you'll divorce her. We might as well get that house from her family while we still can. She's their only daughter. Everything her parents have will eventually go to her, and what's hers is yours." Greed flickered in her mother-in-law's eyes as she calculated. When she noticed Willow standing there, her expression didn't change in the slightest. She said, "You've come back at the perfect time. Makoto and I were just discussing moving into your parents' house. This place is too small. Our whole family is cramped here. Your parents are just the 2 of them, and they're getting old. They can easily rent a smaller place." Her mother-in-law rambled on, so used to ordering Willow around that she assumed Willow would agree to anything without question. Years of bullying, oppression, and unreasonable treatment exploded all at once in that moment. Willow raised her hand and slapped her mother-in-law hard across the face. She had just been discharged and was still weak. After putting all her strength into that slap, she nearly lost her balance herself. But seeing her mother-in-law's face quickly swell red, she felt an overwhelming sense of satisfaction. The next second, a sharp pain struck from behind. Makoto had swung a chair and smashed it into her. Willow fell to the ground. Instinctively, she shielded her head and face as fists rained down on her like a storm. As he beat her, Makoto shouted, "That house is mine. I'm getting it no matter what." Struggling, Willow cried out, "That's my parents' house. They're old. Where are they supposed to live? Let them go find George. Your childhood sweetheart has made it big. He's a chief physician now. He was the one who performed your surgery back then. Finding a place for your parents to live would be nothing for him." At the mention of George, Makoto's expression turned dark, and his punches became even more vicious. Hearing George's name at a moment like this, the pain in Willow's heart completely overwhelmed the pain in her body. Only then did she realize it had been George who performed her surgery back then. But if he had known she was ill, why hadn't he come to see her? She had stepped onto the wrong path from the very beginning. Seeing her fall to such a state now, why hadn't he come to take her away? Makoto continued his furious ranting. The overwhelming pain, both physical and emotional, caused the regret and hatred Willow had suppressed for so long to suddenly explode in her mind. In a daze, she fumbled across the floor and grasped a broken piece of the chair, struggling to raise her hand. When she came back to her senses, Makoto was already lying in a pool of blood beside him. Her mother-in-law screamed and fled. Willow didn't run. She was calm, almost obedient, as she followed the police to the station. The verdict came quickly. She was sentenced to 6 years in prison. In court, the lawyer defending her was highly capable. He presented years of evidence of domestic abuse, successfully securing a reduced sentence for her. She had always believed that the renowned, top-tier lawyer in the province had been hired by her parents to save her, But not long after entering prison, she suddenly realized her parents were just ordinary people nearing retirement. How could they possibly have the connections or means to hire such a lawyer? The answer was obvious. During visitation, she begged her parents to make sure George would come to see her, no matter what. The waiting felt endless. Yet, on the very next visitation day, he actually came. The present-day George had grown into exactly what he had been like before his death in the previous life, mature and handsome, though now there was a greater ease and openness in his expression. She had long heard that he was married, his wife being his university classmate. From the looks of it, he must be living a very happy life. Willow stared blankly into George's eyes. They were still as gentle as before, almost magical, making her eyes redden as she softly murmured, "I regret it." Unfortunately, her repentance earned neither his concern nor his sympathy. He merely smiled and said calmly, "It's all in the past." Willow extra 4. For a moment, countless words choked in Willow's throat, yet none could be spoken. Separated by the glass wall, they fell into silence. Now, George no longer had the patience to wait for her. Seeing that she remained silent for a long time, he stood up and prepared to leave. Watching his departing figure, Willow suddenly felt as if a large piece of her heart had been hollowed out. "George! George!" she screamed like a madwoman, desperately pounding on the glass. The glass was transparent, yet it divided them as clearly as two separate worlds. Even when she had killed Makoto, she had never felt such despair. Fortunately, George turned back in time and sat down across from her again. She said, "You were reborn too, weren't you? You were reborn too, right?" Afraid he wouldn't wait any longer, Willow urgently voiced the doubts buried deep in her heart. She desperately wanted an answer, yet at the same time, she feared hearing it. George neither confirmed nor denied it. Seeing his calm demeanor only made Willow more certain of her suspicion. "If that's the case, why don't you love me anymore? Why didn't you save me?" Under her nearly hysterical questioning, George finally spoke. "Everyone in this world has to take responsibility for their own choices. In the previous life, he chose Willow and paid for it with betrayal and death. In this life, Willow chose Makoto, so she must bear the consequences that came with that choice." George's words struck like a dull thunderclap, sending wave after wave of shock through Willow. She wanted to say that she regretted it, that she had truly regretted it for a long time. But by the time she came back to her senses, George had already left. Willow knew that in this lifetime, and in all the lifetimes to come, she would never see him again. After the visitation ended, the prison guard escorted her back to her cell. It was clearly midday, yet the prison corridor was especially dim, just like her life, long and silent, as if it would never reach an end.